Hello, I'm Bella Perez Rubio, PumaPodcast, and you're listening to Teka Teka News. In today's episode,
Some years ago, somebody asked was Rizal's height, and the standard answer of people without any basis was 4'11" because he was supposed to be small. I was never happy with that because I mean, what is the source for 4'11"? It can be 3'5", diba? It can be 5'8" or 6 foot.
renowned historian Ambeth Ocampo tells us how he settled a long running debate over just how tall or short Jose Rizal was. Many of us were taught that our national hero stood at just below 5 feet. But Dr. Ambeth Ocampo, a history professor at the Ateneo de Manila University, always questioned this. In fact, Ambeth says there was evidence unearthed decades ago that showed Rizal was at least 3 inches taller.
So the way that I did it, and that's amazing that nobody seems to have done it before, was to go over Rizal's clothing. Actually, in the 50s, there was a bodybuilder who had actually measured Rizal's clothing in Fort Santiago. His name was Angel Anden. He was the first one to say that based on the clothing, he was probably 5'2".
But Andan's primary concern wasn't Rizal's height, it was his overall physique.
Angel Anden sort of concluded that if you had seen him, Rizal, physically based on the measurements, Rizal had a perfect V-shaped back. And anyone who goes to the gym knows that you are never born with a perfect V-shaped back. You work very hard to get it. So what came out here was that Mr. Anden was also looked at. Fort Santiago used to have, I don't know if it's still there, used to have Rizal's weights because he was a bodybuilder. He weighed the weights, and based on the estimated height, his conclusion was that Rizal was lifting weights that were too heavy for him.
And although Ambeth measured the same clothes of Rizal and arrived at the same conclusion that he was 5'2", for many years, he struggled to convince everyone else.
We only had the clothing, and nobody still believed me with the 5'2", such that when Ayala Museum reopened the dioramas, they had a section where they had illustrations of different heroes and their estimated height. And I don't know where they got it, but they put Rizal's height as 4'11". So I told them it's not 4'11", it's 5'2", etc. Then, of course, they want the proof.
Just last week, the historian learned that he was off by at least an inch as well.
I was going through files, and there was a manuscript of Rizal's, which is now in the National Library of the Philippines, which I had not seen before. I sort of overlooked it. I think it was even mislabeled. To label it, I went through the pages, and lo and behold, in one of the pages, Rizal had written that when he was 19 years old and 4 days old, his height was 1 meter and 61 centimeters. No? So when you converted that, it comes out to about 5'3". Even the 5'2" does not work. And of course, he was 19, which means that, he would have grown until he was about 25. So if you add an inch or two, it's 5'3", 5'4", that Rizal's height was.
Ambeth adds that because Rizal also notes his age, 19 years and 4 days, we now know that he wrote this in 1880 when he was in Manila.
This was done after his 19th birthday. So, this is a time, I guess, that you want to look at your height, and he listed it down. Now, of course, while this should be the definitive height at age 19 and 4 days, of course, when he grew older, he probably grew an inch or two more. It's definitive for that time that he measured himself. So the other questions, which are valid questions, are, did Rizal measure himself correctly? Or was Rizal actually smaller but he wanted to be taller, so he lied in the notebook? So these are other questions. But as far as we are concerned, we go by what he says at the moment.
We'll pause for a quick break, but when we return, we ask, Why do these discoveries still matter? Ambeth's Facebook post about Rizal's height last August 31 went viral and was soon picked up by the news. That's the strange thing about history. In many ways, this discovery is groundbreaking and new, but the evidence had been lying in wait for over a century.
In the National Library, it was just listed as a notebook, Rizal's notebook. And that's why I had to refile because the National Library finding guide is usually based on the covers, probably in before the war. Somebody just put, a notebook of Rizal. But there's no added information there. So each manuscript that I'm refiling, I sort of try to figure out, go through it one by one to see what year was this written? Where was this written? So in my files, I'm now arranging it chronologically.
Again, you might ask, what's the big deal? Does this change the way we see Rizal?
And of course, people say, this is trivial material. I mean, who cares? I mean, so there have been people who 5'3", 5'2". He might have been 3 feet for all we care, but he was still a giant in terms of our history.
But more than just random pieces of trivia, Ambeth says discoveries like this one remind us that there's always more to learn when it comes to our national hero.
It's that curiosity. We want to find out more about this man who we are all taught from childhood to be the father of the country. And I'd like to think that in order for Rizal to be more relatable to a new generation, that while we look at him as a static figure in a monument made of bronze or marble, that we make him flesh and blood again, that we see him as a person. And it is because when you see him as a person, then you appreciate why he became a hero. And more importantly, why you too can be a hero.
In fact, even as he continues to cement himself as the foremost authority on Rizal, Ambeth says he often thinks about what he still doesn't know about our national hero.
And so in the back of my mind, I'm always wondering, what are these things that Rizal left out? Or what are the things that we will still find? That notebook with the height. I saw it before, but I didn't notice it. I don't know if people have seen it or, people are reading, but and at the time they did not think it was important. So this continuing reevaluation of Rizal, it happens with me because I read him and I reread him all the time. I mean, every semester that I teach.
Ambeth's boundless curiosity has often led him to make discoveries that are less flattering than this recent one about Rizal's height. A photograph of Rizal's skull, taken after his body was excavated, led a dentist to conclude that Rizal may have needed braces because his jaw protruded. This was confirmed by Ambeth when he found two photos of Rizal that showed off his prominent chin.
When he would pose in such a way that it would downplay his prominent chin. So we know how vain he was. I mean, in the age before pads, his left shoulder was lower than his right shoulder. So Rizal used to wear pads so that when he wore a coat, his shoulders would be symmetric.
Another dentist even told the historian that Rizal had poor flossing habits and probably had bad breath. Ambeth says he copped some flack for these when he was trying to write about Rizal.
A generation before me, that's why when I started writing, many old people were sort of upset kasi, ay nako, sinisiraan ni Ambeth Ocampo si Rizal. That's not true. I mean, the way that I treat Rizal is the way that I would treat my own grandfather. So, warts and all, or whatever he is, no, he had bad breath. His left shoulder was lower than the right. He was 5'3". That doesn't matter to me.
But Ambeth Ocampo has undoubtedly changed the way Filipinos are taught about Rizal today.
It is in Rizal's humanity that we see the secret of his greatness. That in the past, kasi because the emphasis was always, Rizal is great, I'm not. I'm a weaker person. But when you see Rizal human, then I'd like to think it inspires you to say that I too can be like him.
And that was today's episode of Teka Teka. Again, I'm Bella Perez Rubio. This episode was produced by Kat Ventura and edited by Presh Capistrano. If you liked today's episode, share it with a friend or two, and follow Teka Teka and Puma Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're excited to build our community with you, and it looks like we'll be able to meet for events real soon. So if you want to stay in the loop, please go to PumaPodcast.com and subscribe to our newsletter. Thanks for listening.